In today's podcast episode, we are joined by Serena Mastin, a marketing specialist who runs the firm Pulse Marketing. This conversation starts out with a bang, and we take some wild turns throughout the episode. Serena's journey is a testament to resilience, and she has conquered some massive challenges throughout her life. If you are an entrepreneurial, having hurdles on your entrepreneurial path, I really want you to listen to Serena's story for a megadose of motivation. Serena, always a pleasure to see you.
Thank you.
I'm glad we could sit down and do this. And when I was prepping for the show, actually, I was learning a lot about you that I did not know, because I love working with you. Obviously, you and your team do an excellent job marketing our shared clients. But there's a lot about you and your past and your philosophies that I really didn't know about, that I would love to dive deeper into today if you're up for it.
Yes, I kind of I felt a little guilty, answering some of the questions and sending it to you, because I'm like, either Nico's going to fall out of his chair or he's going to be really curious.
Both. The answer was both.
Yeah.
So let's start with your personal journey, really. And I was very blown away by that. Your personal journey from extremely challenging beginnings that I want to read more about, honestly, to now you've become this very successful person, very great business owner who I love working with. But would you maybe mind sharing with the audience some of those obstacles that you've overcome?
Yeah. So when most people say they have a hard life, or they grew up, in poverty, I resonate with that, but I don't know if it really is in the same line with some of the things that I faced. And so my biological father was the leader of a satanic cult. And he not only sexually abused my sister and I, but there was all types of abuse going on in the house, drug abuse, all kinds of things. At one point, what I didn't recognize is this wasn't normal, because that was my normal. But the entire mobile home was being recorded at all times. And so there was no phone. You couldn't make a phone call without someone knowing or it being recorded. When we would go with my mom to the grocery store, there would be, members of the cult following us. So what I didn't recognize at the time was that we were in this, very locked down environment. And some of the things that I saw and some of the things that I was around were disturbing and very traumatic for a little girl. My mom couldn't get us out because of those things. And so by the time that she did, she had to earn her rights back as a parent. And so my sister and I were then put into witness protection in multiple foster homes. So wow. That's how the story begins.
I mean, yeah, it sounds like a story. It sounds like a movie, or the beginning of Queen's Gambit, maybe a little bit, before you became a grandmaster of chess or something.
It's crazy.
It is incredible. And so I would have never guessed any of that, from how we met and you being such a joyful person. It just speaks to your resilience, I would say. Could you maybe share some insights into how you've been able to overcome those challenges? Like, how did you go through that gauntlet and become who you are today?
So I had this unwavering determination to prove everyone wrong. And that, definitely did not work in my favor as a child. But it did work in my favor as I started to become more self-aware and to really learn through some of my experiences. I went through 9 different foster homes. I lived with, extended family, that those environments were cruel and unusual. And then from there, by the time I was 16, by this point, my mom's earned her rights back as a parent, but I'm way far gone. I'm I'm my own person. I've already kind of evolved. And I ended up living on the streets when I was 16 years old, enrolled myself into high school. Um, so I would, and when I ran out of places to stay, I would sleep on a park bench across from the high school, sneak into the high school in the gym in the morning, take a shower, and then just act like I was a normal teenage girl. And so when I graduated high school, I was determined to shift everything. I was determined to show all those who doubted me that I was not going to be a statistic, even though I totally became one.
But a
I
good
was
one.
also
You became one
I
of the
was
good
also in
ones.
denial. Okay, I was in denial. But I didn't just climb the corporate ladder. I was scratching and crawling my way to the top, and by the time I was a VP of marketing, I had bought my first house by the age of 23. Which was unheard of, right? Like in that time, and I became a VP of marketing for a large organization by the time I was 26. So
Wow.
yeah, so I was just determined to just prove the world wrong. And then also I was determined not to let my past define me. And so it wasn't my choice to be brought up in that environment. And I didn't want that to dictate the path or the course of my life.
Incredible. And so, I mean, was that so you're 26, you climb the corporate ladder. Is this like, okay, you've overcome your past and now you are who you are today? Or is there more to this story?
Oh, there's so much more.
Okay.
But no, so I started the agency Pulse Marketing in
Okay.
2013. Um,
Yes.
and when I started the agency, I was married.
Mhm.
And my husband, a few months after I started the agency. Now, remember, I have no idea what I'm doing. I don't, like I was a VP of marketing for a corporate, environment. Now I'm trying to work with all these little small businesses, fish stores and donut shops. And I was like,
Right.
night, and I'm trying to apply these corporate bylaws and rules, right? Like, no. But about a few months after I started the agency, my husband came home from work early one day, and I'm like, "Oh, hi, honey. Like, what are you doing?" And he goes, "I quit my job." And I was like, "What?" Anyone who knows an entrepreneur's life knows that there are no checks.
Yeah. Yeah.
There is not a paycheck. And so my heart dropped. And I just remember he said, if I'm going to sell anything, I'm going to sell something I believe in. And he knew how to manipulate me. So
Okay.
he he definitely, we were the power couple. We were like running and gunning. We had built the agency to over 1 million, and it was thriving. We had this amazing, 3,000 square foot office. It was just this beautiful thing on the outside.
Mhm.
But on the inside, um, my husband was struggling. He was this magnetic personality, charismatic. Everyone loved him. He could just light up the room with his personality. But that magnetic personality also, brought in negativity from the outside, which was he was
Okay.
traveling a lot. And so that led to multiple infidelities. He struggled with mental health issues. And at the time, there wasn't a lot of education about those things. And so I was trying to navigate that. Um, and when we were married for 10 years, I knew that it wasn't just about forgiveness and working through it. When you go through multiple infidelities with someone, the first time is always the most devastating, but you learn how to work through it and you learn how to forgive. Once it's 10 years into a relationship and multiple years into business, any change that you make in your life doesn't just impact your kids and your family and your loved ones. it now impacts your staff, your employees, your clients, your vendors. And so everything is interwoven. But there was a moment where I recognized that I was deteriorating physically. Like I thought I had it. I would hide everything and I would just work through it. But when my body started deteriorating, I knew I had to make a change. And when I found the courage to leave him in October of 2019, he committed suicide in March of 2020. And so that in itself was a flood of challenges. So, and emotions all kind of in one. And in March of 2020 was also when everyone went into lockdown.
Right.
Our office was broken into and $40,000 worth of equipment was stolen. So it wasn't just one wave. It was a multitude. It was like an ocean of challenges. And since then, when I was going through my healing process and really trying to navigate what I was going to do at this point, because I thought in my mind at that moment, I thought I'd lost everything. My team, they came together and they rose up and they ran the agency while I was processing all this. And so I really owe a lot of our success to my team because that's who held me up when I couldn't stand on my own.
Wow. And I love your team. Now I love them even more.
Yes.
That's that's an amazing story. So, and let's maybe dive into the team stuff a little bit, and then we'll come back to the
Yeah.
book which you wrote, which I'm sure was all about all these trials and tribulations.
Yes.
So, Pulse Marketing, been running it from 2013. You said.
Yeah.
I would love to dig into leadership a little bit because the fact that your team stepped up in such a big way leads me to believe that you were probably leading in a great way that would inspire them to step up. So I'm always fascinated by company values, different leadership tactics, that sort of thing. We at Nemian, all of our values are about speed and strength and precision, and it goes well with our lion emblem and it works for us, but there's a million other paths that you can go down. And I know that you emphasize the importance of creating a heart-centered culture
Mhm.
within your organization. Can you talk about that a little bit? Maybe share some practical ways that business owners can do that?
Yes. So your core values are not just something that you throw on the wall. It has to be something that like resonates deeply with you. And those are the values that you have to use when making even a decision to bring somebody into your team. And so our core values, things like we communicate with love. Love is an acronym, LUV for listen, understand, and validate. It also inspires our team members to have a voice and kind of feel safe in an environment where they can say the hard things to say in a loving way, right? So we kind of tie that in. Pulse, we're the heart of creative. We're all about love.
Okay.
Oh yeah,
Hmm.
you see, we're so
I
sweet.
do.
But the beauty in that is that as a leader, you have to not only run the business, but you have to live those values in the face of tragedy or adversity or stress. And when you're living it, then they start to respect you more. They start to see your values come to life and they start to really cherish those values and they live them themselves. And so
Mhm.
everything that we do is not just, oh, these are our values, aren't they so great? No, we hire and we fire based on our values. If you are not in alignment with some of our values, then you're not following through with the commitment you made and it's not the right fit for us. And so that's how we protect our culture. And how I lead as a leader, I'm a very empathetic leader, but I'm also more of a teacher and a mentor because a lot of creatives, especially when you're in an advertising environment, um, they have this part of them that is very um, bright and excited to learn, but they're also very sensitive. So understanding that people are more important than profit, but profit pays the people is kind of how we evolve. So we always think people first, profit second. So a lot of companies operate the opposite way. And a
Yeah.
lot of entrepreneurs have been hurt in the past by people. So they have a tendency to create this barrier, which I've felt that many times. I pour my heart and soul into someone. I've just like developed them. I've trained them. I've paid them. I've given them bonuses, and they up and leave in a like, what?
Yeah.
So I get that there's a side of you that's like, I'm never gonna, put that much energy into someone else again. But that's almost like saying, I'm never gonna go on a date again. I'm never gonna love anyone, right? Like it's the same. So you just have to be really aware of how you're showing up in order to even create an expectation that someone else will show up in that same way.
Yeah. Did you systematize it in any way where,
I
like,
did.
every Thursday we get in a circle and talk about yada yada, or I
And
have lunch with
we
everybody
sing
on my team once a
Kumbaya.
week? Right, exactly.
I did systemize it, and because I'm a process queen. Okay, so
Okay.
process queen over here. Um, so one of the things that we do that's super special is we have a what we call is our all hands on deck meeting. It's every Monday. In that meeting, each person it can bring to the table someone who went above and beyond, demonstrating one of our core values. So that's one way.
Okay.
We're constantly integrating recognition into our meetings. The other way that we do that is at the end of the week, they get an anonymous survey. And I'm the only one who has access to the survey, and I don't participate. It's peer to peer recognition. And they recognize one of their peers. They cannot vote for themselves, but they recognize one of their peers that demonstrated one of our core values. At the end of the year, I collect all those votes, and the person with the highest number of recognition wins a trip anywhere around the world.
Love
And
that.
so
That's awesome.
it's like my designer just got back from Hawaii with his entire family. He has 3 little ones, him and his wife. I mean, Courtney, who she her first trip was to Paris. So,
Hmm.
yeah, this is something that I've created a whole process around because I didn't want it to be from the top down. I wanted it to be peer-to-peer recognition so that you could see people working together and collaborating in a way where it was empowering others, not stepping on others to get ahead.
I love that. Yeah, so it's peer to peer. It's quantitative because you're adding up all of these things over the year, so it's not some subjective thing. And then there's very tangible results and rewards that you get from it all. So that sounds
Yes.
super effective. I actually want to implement that immediately at my company. That's awesome.
It is. It's
Uh,
funny. We also do reimbursements for gym memberships, something small, but it's
yeah.
really to focus on the mind and body work together. So
Hmm.
we're not trying to force our team to go to the gym. We're trying to empower them to put their body and their minds first because then they show up better for everything else. And then one of the other things that we do that ties into this is we actually encourage our team to do one-to-ones with each of their leaders on a monthly basis so that they're constantly measuring. So we don't do 90-day reviews. We don't do annual reviews. We do
Hmm.
what's called a one-to-one, where we just have a conversation like you and I are having. The leader of that department has it with their team to gauge not only their performance, but how they're doing overall. And that is another way that really speaks to that.
Okay. Got it. So let's talk about maybe the client side of marketing and what you all do. Because it sounds like you're doing a lot of great stuff on the employee side. I love that. On the client side, what do most businesses not understand about how they should be approaching marketing? What are they doing wrong usually?
Well, a lot of people dismiss it because they think sales is a standalone. And a lot of times they don't see the value in marketing if they have a really good sales team. The challenge is we have to communicate effectively how those two really are hand in hand. The sales team can't perform effectively if they're producing all of their own self-generated leads, right? But they'll be a lot more effective if we're actually nurturing those leads. We're actually sending them monthly emails. We're engaging them on social media where we understand who the target audience is, so the salespeople aren't going door to door. That's the biggest obstacle, is shifting their mindset from thinking that sales and marketing are separate to understanding that it's actually the two fundamental pieces of a business, because without those two things, you don't have any other departments. You don't have an accounting department if you don't have sales and marketing.
Nothing to count.
Nothing to account for. So a lot of people get in like this mindset of sell, 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 sell. Well, the world has shifted so much. And as you can see, I focus on people, right? I do that same thing in the way that we market for our clients. Is you have to focus on who the audience is, what matters to them. And you have to get in front of them with messaging and content that actually matters, because they can see through the noise. And no one wants to be sold to. They want to work with companies and brands that inspire them or understand them.
And so how do you create that emotional connection with a customer then?
So it all starts with one of our core values is data drives decisions, not opinions.
Okay.
So everything we do is research based. So once we have a client, we dig deep into who their target audience is, who's that persona. And then once we understand the overall consensus of that persona, we actually look at the buying behavior to understand what their triggers them to make a decision. And we kind of follow this, what we call our bank model, BANK. B stands for a blueprint personality that needs planning, needs all the information to see how everything is going to lay out before they make a decision. A is an action, like, I think the action personality that takes an action before thinking.
Yep.
N stands for nurturing. That's the person who is really concerned about the environment, really cares about what they're doing and how it gives back to others. And then K stands for knowledge. Knowledge is the person who needs all the information before they make any decisions, which also can be the bottleneck. So those are the four main personality types. And once we identify which one their persona falls into, now we know how to communicate with them, and now we know how to target their audience with the right messaging.
I see. Okay. So, and I have seen this in action, obviously, because we've worked on clients together before. Yeah. So you go into a client, you research who their probable customer is, which you call the blueprint, right? And so in that process, you're understanding, hey, I think your blueprint customer is your females between the ages of 35 and 44 who live in these areas of the city, and they make the buying decisions.
Yes.
Most of them are going to be this personality type, and this is how that personality type likes to be spoken to. And that's how you create your
and this is what matters to them. Yeah, this is what matters to them, and this is how we get in front of them. And there's so many complexities to that, right? Because it's not as black and white as there's 4 different personality styles and they just make these decisions. But there is a pattern that you start to see when you've been doing it for a long time, what works, what doesn't work, and how do we not only speak to the customer and their tone and their language, but also still representing the customer's brand, our customer's brand. So sometimes we have to shift the brand, right? And shift the overall
Right.
look, feel, design to appeal to the market and still honor their brand. But that's also the beautiful complexity around it.
No, and I love that you brought that up because I see that a lot with business owners too, where it's like the CEO, the owner, and we're talking about small businesses, who don't really have a marketing team who's thinking through these things. It tends to be the owner or the leaders of the business decide what they want the messaging to be out to the community, even though the owner of the business is not really the target customer, doesn't even know how to speak to them, and is usually just getting way too detailed about the product or the service itself instead of the emotional benefits that a customer is going to get from it. So I see
Yes.
this all the time. And I mean, I'm a huge proponent of bringing in experts who understand how this stuff works. Because
We
a lot
live
of
and we
business owners,
breathe this, right? Like every
yeah,
day. I would never expect to go into one of my clients, offices and try and run their business, right?
right,
But
of course.
marketing is what we live and breathe. And so it is true. Sometimes they get really excited about their ideas and we have to gently guide them because the reminder is not that they don't know their business. They absolutely know it, but they know it too well
Right,
that they sometimes get disconnected from the person who's making the decisions to buy their products or services.
exactly. Cool. Okay, so speaking of the emotional connection with one's audience, I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about your book. Unless it is simply the entire story that we went through earlier, but tell us a little bit about when you published it. What your goals are for it, and let's dig in.
So one of the things that I learned about myself is I I was just I'm not an author, right? I'm just not. So I hired a book coach and she taught me how to show my story instead of tell it. So the way I wrote this memoir was I bring you into every moment. And one interesting part is you cannot foreshadow because in that moment you wouldn't have known. So I also
Mm.
had to learn how to write from the
Hmm.
perspective of a 5-year-old little girl
Oh
to,
wow.
a 9-year-old to so I had to write in a way that I didn't see the knowledge or the experience or the end of the story, right? So that was also interesting because it does tie into marketing a little bit. If you think about like learning how to show your story where you're bringing somebody into it versus telling. Like this first part of the episode, I told you my story. But now if I would have brought you in and said, I had long blonde hair that went all the way down to my lower back. And I had this little light blue unicorn sequin sweater and my ripped jeans and my bare feet running through the trailer park. Like, doesn't that give you a different perspective? So
Oh yeah.
that's how I had to write it. And so I think the beauty of that process was it was not only a healing opportunity for me, but it was also learning this whole different way of engaging an audience, right? And so one of the patterns about myself that I also learned is I like to hide. So
Mm.
since I was a little girl, my mom would find me, hiding in the closet after an incident. And I actually continued to hide in adulthood without even recognizing it. Hide
Hmm.
behind I'm really strong. I got it all together. I'm vulnerable, but only so much, right? Like hiding like I have it together. And what I recognized is that when you take that down, then people connect with you more when you start to really show up. And so the book is called Exposed because it is exposing some of the most intimate details of my life. But the subtitle is You Can't Heal When You Hide. And that's because I had to find the courage deep down inside to actually publish it, because I would have just put it under my bed and never shown anyone in the whole world because that's my tendency. How that translates into business is what I also didn't recognize is during this last 4 years since my husband and my VP of sales has passed away. He was the spotlight. He was the face of the company. Even though it was my business, I was hiding behind him. And so learning how to step out in my own way and be in the center stage or the spotlight was really, really hard for me. It was debilitating because I'm just so much more comfortable behind the scenes. So putting myself out there and learning how to do sales myself was a whole nother part of my healing process. And so it was just kind of like a beautiful, experience. I published it last year in May. And so the cool thing is I've been able to sell, on Amazon and self-publish there. And I have people in Australia, in India, just all over the world that are buying my book. And it's such an amazing experience to see that unfold.
Wow. And your team at Pulse, did they have any idea of these stories, dating back to your childhood prior to you coming out with this book?
So yes, only because when, like a lot of, they were here when some of it happened, right?
Right.
So,
right.
A unique story that is in the book, but I'll share it with you, was right after I left my husband, I had to go announce it to my team, right? Like, this is before he took his life. This is me now, like trying to figure out how to navigate my business and how do I tell them this? So I go in, I bring everyone together. I'm trying to be all like strong and like, okay, guys, we're going to go into 2020 and we're going to conquer the world and, we'll figure this out. And I'm just being strong. Right. And my son, who at the time was 18, he worked in the business, as an intern and supporting me with some of the operational stuff. And, I tell them what happened and, we're getting through all this. We cheers the champagne, like we're going to still thrive. And it got quiet and, I heard some bantering back and forth. And I said, guys, we have a no tolerance policy for gossip. Even if this is something that is a unique situation, let's not banter. And my son says, Mom, they're not gossiping. And I was like, what? And my heart fell literally into my stomach. And I'd found out at that moment that my husband had been with one of my employees. And my entire team knew and didn't know how to tell me. And which is completely understandable. And at that moment, it was like, there's nothing, like you can pretend that all these things are behind you, but people see so much more than you think. And I was almost more humiliated that I was hiding in the dark, thinking I was protecting everyone. And in reality, it was this flipped version. And so my staff understands that there's appropriate times to talk about our lives. And when we come together, it's not something we, sing kumbaya and talk about this every day, but it's a journey and we all have a journey. And when you understand these, individuals in your company, each of their journeys are so unique, then you know how to lead them better. So that's how they kind of learned a lot of my story. Unfortunately, I have the most exciting life.
Wow. Well, I mean, I have trouble being, vulnerable with my team. And I, when I talk to leadership coaches, that's a big thing that they say is if you can show some vulnerability, it humanizes you and it
And
opens you
people
up to.
connect with you.
That's right. And so you've taken that to the max.
Well,
and you
not
have
on purpose. I wasn't planning that. I was like, damn it. But yeah, like it's funny. I now we can make jokes about it, right? So I'm like, yeah, everybody really loved my husband. Yeah, they really did. They loved him so much.
Oh God.
Because there's this part of you that, yes, you're human, but human doesn't mean that you're victim, right? Like when people think I have to be vulnerable, that makes me a victim. No, it makes you human. And people are able to actually respect you more and connect with you more when you're not all put together. Because how hard is it for you, even? I mean, for you to connect with somebody who's completely put together?
Yeah.
You just don't.
Yeah.
So,
Well, Serena, thank you so much for sitting down with me and talking about such an incredible story. Is there anything else you would like to cover before we sign off?
no, I think if I was to share one thing with entrepreneurs, because this is something that I thought, it's success isn't when you get to the top of the mountain and you're up there and you're just like, hitting your chest like, I've made it. It's really all of those obstacles on the mountain that you are going through, the journey, the blood, the sweat, the tears, the falling and sliding back down the mountain and having to reclimb up it. It's those moments that actually create who you are and the real vision for your journey. And the success comes in those moments. And so to celebrate those little moments, even when they feel like you're falling down the mountain.
I love it. Well, thank you so much. I encourage everybody to pick up a copy of Serena's book, Exposed. You Can't Heal When You Hide. And Serena, thank you again. I will see you next week, I'm sure.
Yes, thank you.